Okay, we're going to move on into our next section, and I'd like to invite Mayor Gray up to say a few words.
Thanks, Jerry. Hey, Marty, that was enthusiasm. Let's give him another hand. That was great, man. I'm glad you hadn't run away yet. You know, when you have a great capacity for doing something really remarkable that everybody in this room also has a capacity for, and that is crowding the winner's circle. The folks who come on this trip, just so you know, you probably already heard a lot about it, but annually, folks in this room go to a city, and Commerce Lexington has been doing this for as long as anybody in the country. And yesterday, on the way back from lunch, I was with Councilmember Steve Kay and Lisa Atkinson. Lisa, where are you, Lisa? You're here somewhere. Hold your hand up. And we were talking about these events, and whenever we go to another city, we get to learn a lot, of course, see a lot of things. And they were also saying that, you know, what's great about it is just the opportunity of being together. And as you said, often when you go somewhere else, what you're thinking about is what we're going to do when we go home, how we're going to improve things, what kind of initiatives we're going to sort of borrow or steal from where we've been. And he's shaking his head real big, y'all, so we must be on the right track. I tell you what I really love, though, is that story he told about Medtronics. I have to share this with you. You told about Medtronics coming from California, and those folks saying that, you know, folks in San Antonio are just so friendly, so nice. Well, let me tell you, that virus must have been translated to Lexington. And why? In my campaigns, I've been through 3 of them, and almost routinely when I'd see someone, I'd ask them, now, are you a native of Lexington? Well, only 20% are about natives. 80% have moved to Lexington. So I would often ask then, what brought you here? And routinely, almost, they would say, this is such a friendly place. And, you know, so thank you if from San Antonio we have acquired that virus, or perhaps you all acquired it from us. Anyhow, we appreciate it. The next part of the agenda, I really want to thank Jerry. You know, it's sort of serendipity, I guess, that you had the idea of San Antonio. And it sort of, I think, on the going down the river, exploring the river walk, considering perhaps what has been imagined through the task force for Lexington. Marty, for what it's worth, we don't have a river, but we got a creek in Lexington that was once the center of our city, the water source. You know, great cities almost always had a water source, one way or another. Well, Lexington was settled 237 years ago in 1775, and it was settled around the Town Branch Creek. Over time, as the city developed, as the downtown developed, that creek was covered up, covered over, in a culvert. But it's still there. And part of the imagination in a project that we're examining today, our Rupp Arena, which was the home of the 2012 NCAA UK Wildcats, oh, by the way, yeah, there we go. There was some clapping going on, was built almost 40 years ago, and today is being examined. There's an examination that just has completed by a task force that was appointed about a year ago to examine the options of building a new arena, renovating the existing arena, and what could be created then through and around it. And this task force charge was to examine that and to examine the needs, uses, and benefits of this 46 acres, which was really pretty unusual for a city like Lexington, a really modest downtown. And this project was built in urban renewal period. And today we have almost more than 23 acres of that 46 acres owned by the city is surface parking lots. As the mayor of Columbus, Ohio said to us when the task force went to examine benchmark cities who have created arts entertainment districts, Mayor Coleman said when he heard 25 acres, he said, oh, He said, I didn't get in this job as an urban planner, but I have learned that surface parking lots are evil to a city. You just got to work on it. So, you know, one of the takeaway sessions is today is to look at the possibilities associated with that project. And to introduce it, we have a 4.5-minute video. Some of you all may have seen this video. It was created by the task force, in a sense, to pull together the recommendations of the task force. It was the task force was led by Brent Rice, who's a local attorney and a leader in the community. One of our, you'll be interested to know, Marty, one of the chairs of the task force, along with Luther Deaton, who was chairing the finance committee, one of the chairs of the committees was a guy named Will James. Will is the president of Toyota Motor Manufacturing, Kentucky. 25-year veteran, 27-year veteran of Toyota. In fact, he and I were on the job site there. I may have known that Takanaka fellow that you talked about if it was Takanaka Construction. I don't know. But anyway, Will chaired the task force for the committee for the needs, use, and benefit. And he is in this little video. He talks about the value of Lexington's history as it relates to tourism. But what Will be the first to also share with you in his traditional Toyota problem-solving way. He will say that, that build it first for your own people, then others will come. I think that's a touchstone for us as we examine the possibilities of our city going forward. You know, how a project like this, especially in today's time, which I think San Antonio has really done well, is to examine carefully the ways in which quality of place and quality of life provide that kind of inspirational pull, gravitational pull for commerce, for people wanting to live in your city.
All right, next we're going to move into the building change section. On the first day that we were here, we all filled out a card that said what projects we'd like to lend our energies and talents into. So I'm going to ask Amy Carrington and Sherry Evans-Depp to come up and share with us how we're going to move into the next section.
Well, good morning. Hopefully you've all had a wonderful time and been able to have a great time while taking in all of the things that San Antonio had to show us. It comes the time when we take the fun that we've had and we channel it into what are we going to do when we get back to our home base? What are the things that we're going to work on? You know, we've talked a lot about the ideas that we've gotten from other trips. We have done a lot of trips, and on the first day we talked about just a small number of the things that we've done that have really made a difference in the community already. Everything from the Legacy Trail. You know, at Lexmark, we've got the Legacy Trail right in front of us, and just seeing the usage that it gets and how many people take advantage of that every single day is just wonderful. Talking about how we can help individuals who are trying to start a business, and how do we do that? Those are the kinds of things that are very important to our community. We looked at, going into this trip, what are the things that we know we're already working on? What are the initiatives that are already very important to us to build that great American city? And how can we take those things and really channel our ideas to those? And those are the things that you guys were asked to look at on the very first day and say, where do I have passion? Where do I have a real drive to be involved in those things? And those things were looking at a private-public partnership around the Rupp District, also the partnership on building a more lively downtown business climate. How do we do that? Philanthropy, arts and culture, and then the regional economic development. And so what we're going to do this morning is take advantage of all of those things that you have seen, all of the synergy that you have from wherever you sit in the community, and put those things into practice. So, Mark, if we can kind of show a roadmap of what we're going to be doing this morning. The first thing that we're going to do is break out so that you can have more conversation with other people who have that same interest. So we're going to do the breakouts based on the information that you guys put down. So on the tables, there should be a listing that shows who is going to be in which of the breakouts, and also which room. So if you look at those handouts, hopefully it's easy for you to find yourself. They're in alphabetical order by your name. That won't be too hard. And what we're going to do is we're going to take about 45 minutes for the small groups to talk about what's the vision. What are the things that we saw in San Antonio that are parallels to Lexington, things that we can scale down or scale up for ourselves? And how do we start putting those into a vision for Lexington? We've already got the parameters of our initiative, so it's really saying, what's the story we want to tell? What do we want to look like? And then what are the actions that we're going to have to get to in order to make that happen? So there are 4 groups. Each of those groups has a subset of facilitators, and we're going to break you up. And Amy, do you want to talk about how we're going to break them up once they get into the rooms?
Yes. Okay. So you see your initiative, your name's under initiative, and with that initiative is a room assignment. When we break out into our sessions, staff members will be out in the hallway to direct you to the rooms. I will let you know that the Rupp Arena Public-Private Partnership Initiative will remain in this room. We'll have the Philanthropy, Arts, and Culture Initiative also on this level in Zabata, which is down towards where you dropped your bags off. So that's the Philanthropy, Arts, and Culture Initiative. Now we've got our public-private partnership developing a more lively downtown and also regional economic development. You all are going to go down the steps out this room to the right. There's a grand staircase. You're going to go down that, turn to the right, and you'll see Tyler Campbell and Jenna Greathouse down there indicating which rooms you go to, and their signs. And also your rooms are indicated on this sheet, which is on your table with your name and your initiative. And so when you get to your assigned room, there will be a Commerce Lexington staff person at the entrance of the room, and that person will give you a block. So each room is going to have multiple colors for the blocks, and that is how you're going to be split up into your groups. So whatever you color you get, the facilitator with that color is who you're going to be with. Now, if you're a facilitator and you haven't seen me this morning to get your handout, then please come see me when we break out. But everyone else, what you need to know is you're going to go to your assigned room with your initiative and get a block from a Commerce Lexington person. And these are your souvenirs from the trip. So they have a little San Antonio leadership visit so you can take it home and enjoy that, put it on your desk, and think about all the great things we're talking about or getting ready to talk about in this session. Does everybody have a good understanding of what's going to happen, how we're going to break out? Any questions?
All right, before we break, there's one other element that we have, and that is how we report out. So one of the things that we found very effective last year was to have a summary, a synthesizing of all of the ideas. And so this year what we've done is we've asked some of our, we're calling them roving reporters, bless their hearts, but we're going to have reporters, some of our best people in our community who are going to be assigned to each of the rooms. So for the Rupp Arena District, Tom Eblin from the Herald Leader, and Tom is going to be, again, roaming around as the groups are working through and commingling with you, listening to what you're saying, starting to get some ideas. For the Developing a More Lively Downtown Business Climate, Mark Manuel from BCTC is going to be your roving reporter. Eric Carlson will do the philanthropy, arts, and culture piece. And then Tom Martin with Business Lexington will be in the regional economic development area. So your roving reporters will be out there gathering ideas, and then facilitators will the handouts that you've worked on, will give those to the reporters. We'll come back to this room for the report out, and we will hear the story, tell the story about what it is that we're looking at, what is our vision, and how are we going to get there. So we figured having the professionals out there who can really pull those stories together would be a great idea. An added piece to this is that as we look at the actions that we need to really put these things into play, we are going to kickstart that through the Leadership Lexington projects. Amy manages that process, and one of the things that we thought was so important was to actually come back and immediately start taking those actions and not waiting for, sometimes we start spinning and things don't happen as fast as we would like. And do you want to talk a little bit about what that will look like?
Yes, so the facilitators in your smaller groups within your initiatives have a one sheet that they're going to fill out and give to the roving reporters. Then Commerce Lexington is going to collect those one sheets, and what we're going to do is come up with a list of different initiatives, maybe some low-hanging fruits that we can suggest to the Commerce Lexington, Leadership Lexington participants. These are some projects that our community leaders feel are of importance. Also, general themes that come out of this last session. We'll communicate that to the Leadership Lexington class. These are some top issues, top priorities that our community leaders think that we need to focus on as a community. So this will be proposed to the Leadership Lexington class when they come together for their orientation in August.
Excellent. So we're going to take 45 minutes for you to get into your small groups and work through the information. So we are going to give you until about, let's say 20 after. Actually, maybe just a little bit less. So at 20 after, if you facilitators can make sure that you have your handouts completed and let the reporters get that information, we will reconvene in this room at, let's see, about 25 till, and the reporters will then be able to do their report out. So if everybody's clear on where you need to be, we'll take this time, get you into your rooms. We really encourage everybody to be fully participative. This is the time when we all bring our ideas together. Everybody in this room has a voice, so please make your voice heard.
Now, I know some of you are a little bit tired from last night because we had a lot of fun. So we got caffeine out there. Grab some caffeine, get your brain ready. This is your chance to give your input after all your learning. Thanks.
They also just go ahead and shoot you right.
Lots of good conversation, lots of good ideas. So one of the things that I think is one of the best things about Commerce Lexington trips is that this group knows how to have a whole lot of fun, but also knows how to come together with some incredible ideas. And I always find one of the hardest things is breaking the groups up. And some of the things that I facilitate, I have to train people to get them to stay in their groups. In this group, there's so much good conversation going on that it's actually kind of hard to break everybody back so that we can talk about the things that the discussions are leading us to. So I appreciate very much your commitment and your devotion to those conversations. So what we're going to do now is we are going to hear from our roving reporters about the stories that they heard. What's the vision? What is the story and the actions that we will be able to bring back to Lexington? So I'm going to start with Tom Eblin and the Rupp Arena District, and each of these folks will then have the conversation about what they heard in their topic areas.
This work? Okay, yeah. All right, well, we had 4 different groups. This was a big group because so many people are interested in what's going on with the Rupp District, so I tried to flit around to the 4 different ones and also read the handwriting of the facilitators as they, but there was actually, though, all 4 groups had a lot of similar things to say. One of the things that I think people were surprisingly struck with is the similarities between downtown San Antonio and downtown Lexington. You know, in many ways they're very different cities, but one of the key similarities is that kind of poor excuse for a stream that both cities have running beside them or running through them. You know, I think a lot of people had naturally assumed that the Riverwalk was a much, you know, it's called a river. It's a much bigger stream. And actually some of the preliminary things is that shows there may be more water in Town Branch Creek than there is in the San Antonio River, because the Riverwalk is pretty much a totally manufactured body of water. So I think that really helped bring a lot of people to the idea that there really is some kind of a serious thing that we could do with a water feature, which is something that's been discussed for years. But one of the key things that people thought we need to do is find out, you know, exactly what that would involve. You know, what lies beneath? Where is the water? How much is there? And what kind of, you know, engineering and financial thing would be required to bring that to the surface? There was a lot of comments here about how San Antonio has done some interesting things with outdoor public space, from converting old surface parking lots, we got a few of those in Lexington, into really nice little pocket parks, outdoor space, or places for commercial or residential redevelopment. There was a lot of talk then about also how, you know, Lexington could learn from San Antonio about having kind of government-led initiatives on developing parking garages, and also the wayfinding to find those parking garages. You know, as a lot of people know, there's a lot of parking in downtown Lexington, but it's hard to find unless you know where it is. There was also talk about, you know, I think that people realize that Lexington, we could do a better job of supporting some of the organic growth areas around kind of the Rupp District where things are already taking place in a big way. The Jefferson Street corridor, which has kind of grown up out of nowhere. You know, the Cheapside development, which has really taken off since Fifth Third donated that pavilion. You know, and plus the kind of other unlikely growth areas like National Avenue, North Limestone, some of those. So supporting the organic growth we've got and kind of working that into the plan. There's a lot of emphasis, I think people took away from here, about the pedestrian and kind of non-vehicular experience, you know, biking, walking. You know, I think it kind of encouraged people to do more with our trail system, and more than anything is to really get moving with efforts to slow down traffic downtown, and in many cases convert one-way streets back to two-way streets. Dudley Webb had a wonderful observation that one of the most beautiful views in downtown Lexington is looking up 2nd Street toward the cupola on the top of the 1850s old Sayre building at Sayre School. How many of you see that very often? You don't see it very often because 2nd Street is one way in the other direction. So think about that. In kind of more big picture look, a lot of people talked about, you know, the can-do attitude in San Antonio that they saw, and the fact that you kind of listen to the public, but you don't get waylaid by naysayers. You know, you listen to naysayers to see if they've maybe got some ideas for doing it better, but if all they're saying is can't be done, you just kind of go on and do it anyway. Talked about the need for kind of consistent, not only consistent long-term vision, but consistent long-term leadership. You know, people and in many cases systems of leadership, so that, you know, that every time, you know, the mayor's office changes hands or city council changes hands, that you don't lose momentum. The talk about kind of better communications with the public in terms of getting buy-in on some of these things. Also, a sense of urgency. And a sense of urgency doesn't mean that you're going to get it done tomorrow. It means that you're going to have a sense of urgency for a long-term plan, because, you know, San Antonio began its Riverwalk in the 1930s. You know, this wasn't a 5-year plan. It was a 75-year plan of where they are now. And so as we talk about, you know, what we're doing in the Rupp District, you know, make it clear that, you know, this is a decades-long plan, but we really need to get on it right now. You know, as everything said, it comes down to money in politics, and the money part is that we need to attract more jobs downtown. There's some discussion about, you know, really Lexmark ought to have its headquarters downtown instead of out in that big property up above New Circle Road. But also attracting, you know, using our lifestyle, you know, and the lifestyle amenities in Lexington to attract more corporations and more headquarters, regional offices to the downtown area. But doing that, you know, not having, you know, having Main Street be more retail than offices, but there's plenty of places downtown for offices. Part of this too was kind of, you know, in the conversations, you know, Lexington has a lot of big long-term financial challenges, such as the pension situation, but, you know, those need to be dealt with to kind of allow for long-term flexibility, but they can't can't overshadow the need to invest for the future. You know, spending is not just spending. There is spending and there is investment, and we've got to keep that in mind. Of course, the public-private partnerships they talked about, but I think there's kind of a bigger partnership. One of the most interesting things I heard was some people talk about, you know, I think too often, you know, we think of Lexington, you know, we're a state of small counties. We think of Lexington as Fayette County or maybe kind of a place for the surrounding counties. But Lexington is really, you know, almost kind of an icon throughout much of the state. Many of you don't, Luther Deaton and I are actually probably distant cousins, because we both, you know, come from Haddock's family in Breathitt County. But we used to joke that my grandmother, who grew up in Jackson, you know, loved the mountains, but, you know, we always said, you know, most people want to die and go to heaven, but Ma wants to die and come to Lexington. And so I think, you know, there is something to that. I mean, if you look at, you know, Lexington is often said to be the capital of Eastern Kentucky, and there's you know, people come here to shop, they come here to go, you know, to the doctor and whatever, and it's kind of, you know, a discussion about broadening when we're looking for partnerships, looking for philanthropy, looking for, you know, kind of participation, that there's a lot of untapped resources out in the state that we could look to, you know, as we kind of develop the Arena District, and, you know, which is really kind of a master plan for all of downtown.
I'm reporting on the art, philanthropy, and culture section of the group. And one of the things that hit us kind of from the beginning is how do we go ahead and reach out and let people know not only that we do have things going on in town, but all of the things that we have going on in town, that there is a thriving arts community in Lexington, and we've seen that here as well. You know, we saw yesterday at Blue Star, for those that went on that tour, it's a great arts facility that's just launched a $15 million capital campaign to build their second headquarters and move and expand. And one of the things they do each year is for their fundraiser, they have a 50-50 split with the artists that participate in it. And, you know, I'm a board member of Lexington Art League, and we do a similar thing fundraiser, but we require, or we hope for donations to us from artists, so then we can raise funds. And we figured out ways to help make it less expensive for artists to donate their works, but the way that this place does it is not only are they fundraising for themselves, but they're fundraising for the arts community here in San Antonio. If you sell a piece but only get half the money, you get half of your money, which is fantastic, and more so than just giving a piece away that then would help an organization, but this way it also helps you in the community at large. And we both here in Lexington, or here in San Antonio and Lexington, have rich traditions in the city. You know, we've seen around town, you can't miss the history of Texas and San Antonio and the West here, you know, blocks from this hotel. And we have a very similar wealth of history in Lexington, but maybe we're not doing the best of job at telling those stories. So that's one thing that we needed to look at. We've decided on there is to help focus on what our history is in Lexington and really telling more about it, not only to the people of Lexington, but the people that come visit us. And that also is one of the things, too, that kind of struck some people is yesterday, if they're looking for things, wanting to know some of the more culture things to do in town, not necessarily the more tourist-aimed things in town, who do you go to ask that? And that's the Amigos program. People really liked being able to find a person on the street who was clearly identifiable, that they were there to help you, and say, hey, I want to do X, Y, and Z, where is that? And they were able to point this in the right direction. And maybe that's something that in Lexington we would be able to look at in the future. We've had a similar kind of ebb and flow with our public arts funding in these cities. San Antonio got off to an early start on it, and then kind of died down, and again have picked up again recently with $6 million, which when you think of it's not bad, but in the general scheme of things, $6 million for public arts projects that need to be administered isn't going to get you too awful much, but what it does have tends to focus right around the areas that we, the tourists, are at. And so it gives us a good impression of the city. But what does it do for the people in San Antonio? How often are they down on the Riverwalk? How often are they going under these bridges to see the fish or to see the, you know, the glow-in-the-dark paint? And it's probably not something that is enjoyed as much by San Antonians as it is by the people that come here and as tourists. And Tom's gonna smile and grimace a bit because it's something that we've talked about a lot, is the need for a central calendar of events. That where do you go to find out what is going on in town, whether you're a visitor or you're a local? You know, one thing that I've said a lot of times, I find out what's going on by seeing what my friends are posting about on Facebook. But that doesn't help if I'm coming to San Antonio and want to find out what's going on in San Antonio, or someone from San Antonio is coming to Lexington. They're not going to see much of a Facebook feed about things that are going on this weekend, of which everybody in the group in our room had something to plug. And so I'm just going to give a brief overview of what we've got in Lexington 48 hours from now. Friday night, down in the Distillery District at Latitudes, Robert Beatty is opening his Astral Duets installation, which is a sound and art, visual art collaboration. And that's Friday night at 8 o'clock. Also Friday night, the Carnegie Center is having author Barbara Kingsolver, I believe at the Lexington Center. It's a free, open to the public event, literary events. All weekend in Winchester, it's the Beer Cheese Festival. That just sounds fantastic, and hopefully it's not going to be 95 degrees, because beer, cheese, and heat. Winchester, baby, a good place or bad place to be. This weekend's grand night for singing, the UK Opera. It's a grand night for singing. Really. And also this weekend, Festival of the Bluegrass, 39-year-old family-run bluegrass festival up at the Horse Park. If you stay in to rest for this weekend, you've missed a whole lot of culture in the city of Lexington that you may not have known about, and that we didn't all know about. So how do we go ahead and help people know, not only those that are maybe in town this weekend, but those that live there, what we've got going on? We need to get that out there. And one of the things, too, that we've really talked about and is the need for not only philanthropy. You know, we've got some great people who give in Lexington, but how do we engage more? How do we engage the Jess Jacksons of the world? So when a billionaire horse owner comes into town, you know, a few weeks a year, how do we make him feel that he's more at home instead of just here for horses? how do we do that? And one of the things that was also, we found a parallels between some of the cities we've been to. Here in San Antonio, in the 20s, there was a great flood in the downtown, which they said, all right, we need locks, we need floodgates to keep this from happening again, and that birthed the Riverwalk. Austin, Texas, a few years ago, we saw the collapse of the oil industry in the 80s, left them scrambling. They needed to find something to do to help raise the economy there. We said, catastrophes for these cities have been good. Fortunately, we haven't had the catastrophe, and we don't want that, but we do want the entrepreneurial spirit that tends to grow out of those. What can we do to lift up the people of Lexington to have ideas and to see them through instead of, going for security, going for an opportunity, like Rupp said. You don't find something that's safe, you find something that's an opportunity. How do we go ahead and do that to help raise not only the arts community in Fayette County, but the community in general and the economy in Lexington?
I'm reporting on the developing a more lively downtown business climate, and I will point out that I'm the only person up here that's not a reporter. However, Katie moved me to a Holiday Inn Express last night, so I think I'm okay. I think if I'd go ahead and let Tom go, I could probably just say what they said, and we would be done, and I could be done with this, because we had a lot of very similar thoughts. We had 3 groups of people working, and as they've been pointed out, when you're facilitating, a lot of times you have to work really hard to keep everybody engaged. That wasn't the issue. In fact, I had to break them all up and say, going back, we're done. We've got enough for where we're going. Some of the challenges people saw as parallels from Lexington to San Antonio. One was the water. It's a challenge for us to get it downtown, and it was a challenge for them, would you say 75 years ago or however long ago that was. They're having a challenge right now of getting their community downtown. We have that same challenge, although it was pointed out in one of our groups that our challenge probably isn't as great as theirs. They're bigger, they're spread out, and our folks are a little closer, unless we go all the way out to eastern Kentucky. We have, our challenge there isn't quite as great, but we still have that challenge. And we're very similar with historic significance. They have a lot of history. I mean, we've seen it the whole time we've been here. And we have that downtown. Well, we have it all through the Bluegrass, but we have a lot of that historic significance that came up over and over again of linking things together and exploiting that as assets to bring people downtown and making sure that we develop around our heritage and our culture and not necessarily just inventing something new. Around the vision of downtown, one of the groups actually, we had pictures. If you noticed on your thing, you could draw pictures. I'm not going to try to draw the pictures for you. But one of the groups said that we really want a downtown area that is the center and focal point of the community, reflecting our culture. And I thought that was a pretty good, quick vision. And another group who didn't write that also said, we have a lot of visions, but we haven't had one that everybody believed in and got behind and made it happen. That may be a good thing, that may be a bad thing, but that's one of the reasons we keep talking some of the same things over and over again, and one of the reasons some of the organic growth has happened is because that vision hasn't been there necessarily. So all those groups talked about water, how hard it was to get downtown, but we think we need it. All of them talked about events, that events pull people downtown, that we need an easy place to go. An easy place to go that's web-based, that you can find out what events are going on, that you don't have to search for them, that it's easy to find out, and that those events are retail-friendly and help retail instead of hurting retail. There was an example of parades where all of a sudden you can't get downtown. There's people walking in, but there's no parking. The parades block people off. Those kinds of events may not be the events we're talking about. So. Ease of parking came up, that it has to be easy to get into downtown, and then there has to be a lot of retail. The growth of retail to give people a reason to come downtown and a reason to stay longer downtown for events, for retail, for those types of things. A lot of transportation issues came up, but to have all those methods, whether it's trolleys, whether it's walking, biking, running, cars, all that has to be melded together in a system so that people can get into downtown and get out of downtown and feel like that it isn't a hassle to go down there for an event. A lot of residential issues came up, that we need residential, we need more residential, we need both renting and condos. There was some comments about looking at the segments. Is it young people? Is it families? Is it young families? Is it more mature families? Is it downsizers? Is it seniors? And then growing the residential assets around those segments and what can be taken advantage of. There was a whole lot of other things that came up that would help downtown: utilities underground, the ambassador programs, the green space, incentives. There was some discussion about public-private partnership doesn't mean that it's 50-50 financial, that it's a partnership that's a win-win, and that both sides actually win from it. It may not be that both sides are putting in the same amount of money, but that it provides a better environment for the private sector things to grow, which will help the public sector in the long run. One of the things I thought was very interesting, though, as I just kind of sat back and watched the group's work, is the ownership. Everybody in that room cared. They may have not agreed on two-way streets. They may have not agreed on what to do with Vine Street, although nobody seems to like Vine Street. But everybody cared, which I think is an important thing to carry out of what we do today into the future. That the reason Centerpoint was such an issue was everybody cared about it. Whether it was a private investment or not, everybody cared about it because they care about downtown, and I think that's a positive, because if no one cared, I don't think we're going to get anywhere.
This is like corralling smoke, said the ever-quotable Kim Sweezy as I walked into the room. And then I walked into the middle of 4 groups talking about all these things, and it was like standing in the middle of a gearbox at high speed. Because we have a lot of thinking people in this group and a lot of thought going into what will make our community even better than it is. And I think one of the things that we'll all agree that is a takeaway from our experience here in San Antonio is that we have a pretty neat, pretty good thing going on in Lexington. That said, there was a lot to be learned. And it was our task in our group, our regional group, to kind of raise up to about 20,000 feet and look down on the region, on central Kentucky, and how Lexington relates to its region and what more we can do to relate and link and take advantage of the fact that we have a region in the making, at least. And then to come back down to ground level and look at some of the practical ideas. And one of them that was common among a couple of our groups that I've heard you mention is wayfinding. When we step out of this hotel, you have no problem finding practically anything downtown. Their wayfinding is pretty awesome here. The signage is great. We started that with the World Equestrian Games. We got the first round of it going, but it's still not adequate on the level that we've experienced here. So that's something to take back and keep in mind. And I think another thing that came out from each group was that we have had a tendency to do this and then go back and allow these ideas to kind of dissipate. One year, I believe this was after Oklahoma City, we continued having sessions throughout the following year. And we kept distilling these ideas and focusing them. And there have been some actual practical results of them. So we might want to think about that. I'm just going to tick through some of the points that were raised under parallels, again, parallels between here and home, or needs that were learned here that we should take home, and that would be this first one: strong, transparent, friendly, honest relationships and good dialogue. We're pretty good at it. We're doing it here, but we could do a better job of it, perhaps. Create a more regional connection to our downtown, and do that by considering the transit options that we now offer the region and the expense and cost and time spent in asking those in our outlying communities, and there I'm using a term that they probably would not care for, to make their way to Lexington for the events that we've heard listed here. Just to transgress just for a second, I remember when I was in New York and editors there at ABC News would refer to this part of the country as the heartland. as though it were something else. It was out there. And it was always kind of offensive to me. And then I found out that they'd never actually been across the Hudson River, and that was that. But we might want to think about that when we're communicating with the Nicholasvilles, the Jessamine counties, the Georgetowns, the Mount Sterlings, the Winchesters, et cetera, that they're seeing us from their perspective. And we want to see them from our perspective, but we want to see all of ourselves from a central Kentucky perspective. Maybe we can get a little bit more done. Develop a regional mindset that's anchored by a Louisville and Lexington connection. I heard one table, a very spirited conversation about the fact that you don't hear the kind of dissing of Austin here in San Antonio that we tend to engage in, mostly in a humorous and fun-spirited way when it comes to Louisville. But I think we're making progress on that, but we could do a lot more to think about our connections with our other city down the road. I think the BEAM initiatives, Brookings Institution report, which is going to talk about how we can do that, is due in December. And once that comes out, that's going to lay some groundwork, I think, for some practical ways that we can work more closely with Louisville. Under visions, expand the college system, more college preparation with special emphasis on tracking for the medical field to feed the growth of the healthcare industry that has become so important, not only to Lexington and Fayette County, but to the region. Another point was to embrace the regional idea, create an environment in our downtown and in our city that tells our neighbors that we want you and we appreciate you. I'm not exactly sure how we do that, although I've heard it suggested that we might have a different event each night of the week that is about a different community. Perhaps we have a Nicholasville night. Perhaps we have a Georgetown night. I don't know. Seems like an idea to work from. And here is the 900-pound gorilla in the room. And this was mentioned at every table in one way or another. It was mentioned here on this stage because they're doing it. We heard it in Oklahoma City because they are in the third stage of accomplishing infrastructural and amenity improvements because they have it, we don't. And that is the local option sales tax, Senator Stein. We're constitutionally prohibited from enacting a local option sales tax to fund our own projects and to improve our infrastructure and our amenities in the ways that we want to. So that's something to think about. Obviously, I'm on a bit of a soapbox there. And finally, Representative Palumbo mentioned at her table that we could stand to have more of a cooperative effort and a visibly cooperative effort going on our behalf in Frankfort. That probably starts with our representative delegation, but also in terms of who is speaking for us and how it's being spoken in Frankfort. Maybe a bit more visible effort there so that we can see that we're being represented. We're seeing the fallout. I'm not blaming anybody for this, but as Tom knows back there, the University of Kentucky is going through a very painful period right now, extremely painful period at the moment. Some of you have been away from the news. You may not be aware of it, but layoffs, pretty significant reductions are being announced at the university this week and continuing into the days ahead. And a big portion of the cause of that is the ever-diminishing funding from Frankfurt. We need a strong voice down there that says we need this university. It's the engine of our community. It's our largest employer. So to wrap it up, I think that we do have a nascent regional idea of ourselves in Lexington, but we could do a lot more to incorporate all those communities around us and ask them to participate with us and be a part of what we're doing and see how they can contribute to us, how we can contribute to them, and I think we'd be a lot stronger as a result of it. I hope I've summed up pretty much what I heard. As you all know, in these discussions, there's so much being covered so quickly, it's impossible to embrace it all. But that's kind of a nutshell of what I heard.
Thank you. Well, first of all, let's give our roving reporters a huge hand. It is quite a feat to take all of the information and ideas that you guys have and pull it into a quick, concise report out. So we appreciate that. I also want to thank the facilitators who did an excellent job of keeping everyone engaged, capturing the information, and being able to manage, large groups of people. So thank you. If you guys will give them a hand as well. So lots of good ideas. Some of the things mentioned about having ongoing conversations, Bob and I have talked about those possibilities. Those are all things that we'll look at. As we said, we also will have some buy-in from Leadership Lexington on the actions and low-hanging fruit that we can immediately take action on there. So great conversation. We'll also have the information that came out of these groups on the website, I believe. So with that, I want to thank you guys.